Welcome to Tossing Grenade the Windmills. Windmills.
Welcome to the final chapter of Precyber. This is the first novel I've done for my podcast, and quite frankly, I'm not sure what's going to happen with it after this. But it's been a great journey, and this was in large part the reason I created the podcast. For the moment, at least, it looks like I'm going to keep going with this, and I look forward to doing it with you. But I think there's a lot of opportunity here, and I'm going to see if I can maybe get some commentary from Ken Leitner on this. But regardless, I've enjoyed it, and I appreciate you as a reader and as a listener, and thank you for listening. Here it is, Chapter 55, Precyber, by T.C. Ricks and Ken Leitner. Mary watched the absolute pandemonium break out around the crane, so she expected the call when the local Pinkertons called her. Only after answering did she realize that it might mean they might not suspect her of killing Norn. She was still on the phone as she saw Clark running past. Now that the danger was over, she hoped, she decided to distance herself from him. She waved him off. She needed a plan now. If she was not careful, she could end up in prison for killing Norn. Who would take care of Timmy then? That was an unacceptable scenario. What she found particularly disgusting was the way the drama people pretended the whole thing was all part of the show. The audience played right along and loved every minute of it. It was all garbage, of course, but that was drama for you. She really needed to monitor what she let her son watch for a little bit more carefully in the future. It was not all well, of course. This would not be a happy ending, not for her and not for many people. Ezekiel Norn might have betrayed his country. He might have killed the president and single-handedly worked to weaken the United States for his own political gain. But that did not change the importance of his corporation to the country. Ezekiel Norn was Aqua Noir. The brand value of the company was tied around his persona. Aqua Noir accounted directly for 15% of the United States economy and had direct ties with twice that amount in supporting industries. All of Mary Heath's savings and retirement funds were tied up in Aqua Noir stock or investments in one form or another. Earlier today, that had all made sense. Aqua Noir was the most secure investment in the country, certainly better than government bonds. Aqua Noir was rebuilding the country. Without Norn, the company would be in shambles, and that was virtually everything Mary owned. She and Timmy would lose the house. And so would a lot of other people. Mary knew how bad life could be outside the corporate safety net, and she guessed that thousands of her co-workers might end up on the streets, fending for themselves if Mary did not think of a damage control plan, and fast. Priorities. She needed to put what was urgent and necessary at the forefront. Belatedly, she looked at a dejected Erla. Erla might be a loose end in all of this. In fact, now that she thought about it, what would the authorities do to her once they realized that she had killed Norn? Even if the country somehow pulled through all this, her own family was ruined. They would find out. That bastard Clark would be the hero, and she would be in jail. She could claim self-defense, but enough of the judges were in Aqua Noir's pocket that she knew she would never get a fair trial. She should know. She had arranged enough special trips herself. Then an even greater fear clenched her heart. What if she never even made it to trial? She knew things, dangerous things that could get her killed, or her son killed. Not on her damn watch. If she knew so much and was so dangerous, then she could make that work for her. She was going to determine the outcome of this, not let it be determined for her. Clark and Emily made it back to the safe house in Buckhead around lunchtime, barely. They had kept a close eye out the entire time. A veritable locust swarm of NPIGs, cops, feds, and even some military vehicles had begun to descend on Atlanta. Movement had become very difficult. They ate a quick snack that they had brought with them from Centennial Park and fell asleep. They awoke that evening. Emily began to scan the news while Clark decided to take a closer look at the ShadowNet server he had stolen from Ezekiel Norn's office. Clark opened the case and was carefully peeking around when Emily turned up the volume on the newscast. Reporter: Mary, I know you've been through a terrible ordeal recently, Well, what can you tell us about Ezekiel Norn's murder? Mary. Not much, I'm afraid. It seems that certain elements of our society can never leave well enough alone. By certain elements, you mean revolutionaries? I prefer to call them anarchists. They tear down any form of organization that got in their way. They're not revolutionaries. They're troublemakers. How did Mr. Norn die? 2 particularly psychotic terrorists broke into our headquarters building last night. They tried to steal schematics and schedules for the drama event that Aqua Noir hosted last night in Centennial Park. I was held at gunpoint. They dragged me through Ezekiel's office, shot him, and then used me as a hostage, rushing off to Centennial Park to meet with the accomplices. I was able to break free from at the park and warn security. They were able to stop their accomplices and foil the dangerous plan. However, the 2 who abducted me were able to get away. What do you know about the others? We believe 2 were Colombians revolutionaries that had helped smuggle them in. They were both shot and killed by an Aqua Noir security. Thank God for that. However, there was a 3rd person also killed in the crossfire. He went by the name of Daryl Stenna. However, we suspect he was a very important person in the revolutionary chain of command. I heard him referred to as Shadow Leader. Aqua Noir investigators are still trying to puzzle out exactly what this means, but we believe he was the big fish. Clark saw the picture of the newscaster displayed for Daryl Stenna and said, What? That poor civilian who got shot by the InPig thugs? Shh, replied Emily. Reporter. About your kidnappers? Mary. There were a couple, like Bonnie and Clyde, I guess. They fired shots at our employees. I had to do something. The video showed Mary stop after the last comment and start crying. The camera held on for a few moments and then switched to side-by-side computer renderings of Clark and Emily. Reporter. These are the likenesses of the 2 terrorists who invaded Aqua Noir last night. They are considered armed and extremely dangerous. Should you see them, do not approach them. Call Aqua Noir security to line up immediately and get out of the area. 1888 Aqua Noir. Clark screamed, Shit! Emily looked at him and said, We've got to get as far away from here as possible for a long time. She killed him. She should be the one leaving town, Clark replied. He didn't believe this. He had just begun to have the illusion that he might have some kind of normal life. This was not going to happen now. I know, Clark. Life sucks sometimes. You, of all people, should know that. Yeah, I have some money on my ATM, but they're bound to have frozen it by now. Look, we're safe for a while. They'll be watching the airports and harbors for a while anyway. We need to have a resource plan. Okay, look. Give me your card. I'll go out and check on it. I can wear a big hat and something else for now. Anyone out there probably hasn't seen our pictures yet. Clark sighed and said, Be careful. He handed her the plastic card. Look, while you're gone, I'll go over Norn's ShadowNet server and see what I can find out of it. If nothing else, we can contact another cell. It sounds like a plan. I should be back in an hour. I don't want to use a machine close to here. If I'm not back by then, you better come out and save me. A black limousine dropped Mary in front of her modest home. She got out, thanked her driver, and walked upstairs to her house. Things had gone very well for her recently. The board of directors would vote shortly to choose the new CEO of Aqua Noir, and Mary fully expected to win that vote. In Norn's private files, she had found a little dirt enough on each of the board members to practically guarantee her success. There were other things in there as well. She found a few things so foul that she had buried them deeply. However, she found plenty of useful things as well. Most of them were not entirely legal, but Mary had no fear of being caught. As CEO of Aqua Noir, she controlled 95% of the police activities in the country. What she found most interesting of all was the information about a box that Norn had kept in his office. Something that had not been found, and she suspected Clark might have. She did not plan to use these things merely for the exercise of power. She had plans. The country could be a safer place if only Aqua Noir could control a few more things. Too many parents were choosing the wrong schools, the wrong doctors, eating the wrong foods, and raising their precious children into criminals. Mary could fix that. She would decide what was best for everyone. But first, she would need more power, and that's where Norn's infrastructure would come in handy. Also, as CEO, she could afford a new house. Her new au pair greeted her at the door and told her that her evening appointment was waiting in the kitchen. Mary smiled and asked about Timmy, and headed in to meet her new real estate agent. She wondered whether Timmy would benefit more from lighted tennis courts or an indoor bowling alley or a pool. Or maybe they could afford all three. Mary liked bowling, but it was a blue-collar activity. Perhaps she should replace the bowling alley with something else. Clark sat with Emily, sipping a Mai Tai, and enjoyed the light blue Aruban beach. He leaned up and kissed her on the lips. She smiled, pulled up her shades for a moment, winked at him, and then turned over to let the sun's warm rays improve her tan. Life was not bad for a couple of wanted fugitives, and they were fugitives. The Revolution seemed to think that they had killed Shadow Leader at Centennial Park, and there were all kinds of agents scouring the net for signs of them. Aqua Noir seemed out of the picture, though. The new CEO was Mary Heath, and she was more cautious. She knew that Clark could tell his side of the story and possibly make her whole well-crafted house of cards come tumbling down. She wanted them down here, quiet and out of her way. He looked at the small, innocuous suitcase. On the outside, it looked quite normal, just like any other piece of luggage. But inside, Clark had stored the ShadowNet server core. He hooked up a laptop, keyboard, and display as well, so he could use it from anywhere. At first, they had scanned it to learn about Shadow Leader himself. They didn't find out much about him. Probably Norn kept those files elsewhere. However, it did have some account information, including a rather large offshore bank account that kept them safe and anonymous here in the Caribbean. As long as the only three people on the planet knew about ShadowNet Core, then no one else could be looking for it. They might be looking for Clark, but Clark could log onto the server and assume the persona of the new Shadow Leader, and with that persona, he could keep the revolution going. So far, it looked quite well. A lot of people saw holes in Mary's story without Clark's explanation. A lot of people questioned some of Mary Heath's motives, and those people were ripe for recruiting by the revolution. A lot of underground talk was going on of another constitutional convention, though most people did not take that seriously. How would it work? And how would it get past the state legislatures that were bought and sold by Aqua Noir and the other corps? Right now, that was not Clark's problem. Staying alive and staying out of sight was. That was what he had to do, and if that meant sipping drinks on the beach with the woman he loved for months on end, well, he could live with that. Yep, things had worked out for the best. The Friday game nights had suffered since Clark left. Their team just did not gel like it did before. They missed the camaraderie the old team had. Barfman was gone, Clark was gone, and Paul was gone. It sucked, but they still kept going anyway. A gunshot rang next to Nurgle's head. What the hell? They were using real bullets. He began to whip out his cell phone and call the police when a young woman dressed in all black grabbed the cell phone and held it with a finger to her lips. A dozen men came out of the shadows and shot the other team. What the hell was going on? What the hell was that? Said Harry from behind. A contract was just put on your life because of your association with Clark Yossarian. What? Well, we came here to stop them. We got word of what they were attempting and... What? She smiled and winked. Listen, have you and your friends ever considered joining the revolution?
This has been the Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast. I'm Thomas Ricks. Music by Melanie Ricks. Voices by Skip Huffman and Josie Bergen-Lawson. Copyright 2012.
Kenneth Leitner
and Red Anvil Amalgamated.
to fight the forces of evil.